Hello.
If y'all are watching this later, please comment anytime you think that you want to hear more about anything that I'm talking about. If you are online currently or it's just now getting on, please comment and we will talk about whatever you want us to talk about that's related to this subject, or once we're done with this subject, which is going to be talking about the tangent line, which I think that at the end of this, you'll understand a little bit better about how I approach playing position and how it can be like a process versus just having no direction at all, I suppose. I think people struggle with direction as far as like, well, what's the right shot? How do I play proper position? What's the right pattern in this situation? And they're struggling to have direction. And I think that for myself, once I just really started blocking in the tangent line as being like the beginning of me playing position, then that helped me understand a little bit better about how to play position in general. So the first shot that you really need to learn to be able to use the tangent line, I would say properly, is the stun shot, which is, funnily enough, a straight in ball. So what you're going to want to do here is you need to learn how to shoot this like a stun, where you want the cue ball to just end up in the place where the one is. Not a stop shot, slightly higher ball than that to get to roll into the position where the one is. And the purpose for this, I'll just explain kind of where we're going with this, is to understand the physical effects of the cloth between the distance of where the cue ball is and the object ball, so that we can understand that there's an energy loss, and thus what we're going to do here at the beginning and apply on this shot, because it's a stun shot, we're going to need to apply, bottom English, draw, below center on the vertical axis of this cue ball, to have underneath spin, backspin, which will then get removed over the distance that it's going to travel. And then once it's reached the one ball, it will no longer have any reverse rotation. It's actually going to be just in the beginnings of rotating forward from its position where it was. I'll use the 9 so it's a little bit easier to see. When you hit below center, it's going to be rotating this direction as it's going down here. And then as the cloth is removing this spin, removing that energy that's rotational this way, and then applying, in effect, rotational energy this way, once you've reached this moment, this where it's contacting this spot, it's actually not backspinning anymore, and it's not staying here, it's not sliding. If it's sliding when it hits here, that's a stop shot. So basically a stop shot in this situation would be like using enough draw to where at the moment of contact, it's not moving at all, and then when it hits it, it just stops there because it has no rotation. The fullness of the hit takes all the velocity out of the cue ball, and then whatever spin is on it is what makes it do anything after it's hit this ball. There's a slight amount of bounce back, but you can neglect that because it exists on every shot, and it's not something that you can really do anything about until you start using different ball sets, or potentially you might be playing on a table that has different balls, and now what you have is you have a different effect. Like say, you're playing in a bar where the 4-ball for whatever reason is from a different set of balls, and now you can look at it and you're like, this is not, maybe it's a Centennial ball, and then what you're looking at here, the rest of the balls, are like Aramis. So now they're not, they're pool balls and they're pretty much the same, but they're not exactly the same. So the property is going to be a little bit different. And now when you start dealing with that, now you're going to be talking about like, okay, well there might be a little bit different bounce back than there would be. But for purposes of like all the same match set, that is a consistent effect that you won't really have to account for because it exists everywhere all the time, and it's only slightly different, and it's only really noticeable when you're playing within a different set of balls that has multiple different kinds of balls in it. And then in that situation, you actually have to be a little bit more finely tuned in as far as like even being able to understand the nuances of it, and then it still won't even necessarily be important on almost any shot. So I would neglect that effect, is the ball set and the bounciness and response of the ball is not something you have to really account for. Anyways, back to the story here. So we're going to be going forward slightly, enough to where if you imagine this rotation from a stopped position, it's really just going to be like, bonk. That's not even enough. Just a little bit of roll, right? Just stop in that spot. So once you shoot that shot a few times and you get a feel for it, what you're doing is you're learning how much energy is being removed over this distance, so that if you can like do that same shot from here and stun it forward into that spot, now you're getting that same understanding of this distance and so on and so forth. And really the whole purpose of the stun shot is to learn ultimately how to hit it full, which is important because you need to be able to put your cue ball to a spot to be accurate. It doesn't really necessarily matter if it's a cut shot or a straight in ball. What's important is you can make the cue ball end up in the position that you choose to. Ultimately, why you're choosing it to end up in a certain place is up to you. Maybe you want to hit it to the right side of the pocket versus the left side. Now that changes the shot slightly from here. Not a lot, but it's a different position. What's important is that we can hit the position that we choose. So it's important to learn how to hit straight in balls because I think that vision-wise, it's the one that makes the most sense as far as how to aim. Where if you put the balls where you can appear that they would be in a straight line, you can draw a straight line through the center, or you can match up the right edge or the left edge with the other, and then it just goes straight through the ball, through the perspective, because it's slightly smaller because it's further away. So when you get down and you look at it, you'll be able to cover the one ball up completely and from the straight point, and okay, if I shoot straight over that line, then it'll go straight in, and that's the value of it. And by placing different distances, and now what you're going to do is you'll be like, well, you got to try to make this shot, but really the reason why it's important for tangent line is so that you can understand what the energy of the stroke and the pace of the hit and how that eventually is going to correspond to the tangent line distance that the cue ball is going to travel on. So you got to hit a few of these and get a feel for what you're doing, because there's different ways to hit this ball. So that was a little bit of a stop shot, but for purposes of using the tangent line, a stop shot is actually going to get you there too, so it's not so crucial. So if I'm playing position, say I'm playing for the 10 here, once I get a feel for this friction, now what I can do is, if I use the same hit, the same stun shot, now I can create a very predictable actually path for the cue ball to travel on. Which is, if you draw a line straight between where the two balls are touching, which is the contact point, so that it creates a line, and then the cue ball with no spin on it will go on that line if you hit it from this side. There's going to be residual energy, obviously, that's going to make the cue ball glance off the three ball in this situation, and go this way exactly if you do it properly. So for purposes of playing position, this is advantageous because you can make a decision based off of something that you know is pretty much immutable. If you just execute properly, you will get this line, and thus if there's no spin on it when it hits this rail, it'll also then just come off at this line here, just the natural same angle out as in. Makes sense, right? So then you can maybe choose this spot on that line, because that's going to be fine to get you on the 10. So now the question is, do I understand how to make the cue ball have what I would say is like the hard part to visualize if you're trying to do a visualization of the power is if you take the put it right on the spot so that I can do this exactly the way I can explain it. If you pretend the 8 ball is the cue ball and then you're playing your position on this line to here, now what you're going to try to do is ultimately have the speed of the 8, which is the residual energy that's left on the cue ball after the rest of the energy goes into the 3. It's going to go that way on the tangent line. If you hit it with the stun shot properly, it has no spin when it hits this ball. Maybe a little bit of topspin, could be a little bit of draw. Just for the purposes of this, as long as you're very close to that, you're going to achieve a very close result. And then if you have no left or right English, then your reaction off of this ball, off this rail, is going to be very predictable, which is generally speaking what you hear. Now, if you wanted me to add an extra layer to that, obviously if you're cutting the ball to the left, if the balls have any friction between them, that this ball, when it hits here, is going to stick for a second, and it's going to apply a slight amount of what would be considered right English in this situation. It's going to rotate this way because there's a gearing effect. So actually it's going to be turning like this direction around this way, because I don't have a very good way to show you guys. But so when it hits that rail, if it still has any of that spin on it, then it will slightly make the ball, instead of going straight down this way, it'll come up slightly more steeper. Short is what most people call it, and that's because it's going to have a little bit of spin on it that's from this contact, this collision. So you can use that in, but then the further away it goes, the less of that there is. So you kind of have to neglect it at a certain point. And for this shot, you can pretty much neglect it as being inconsequential. It's more about the speed of the shot, because if you end up here versus here, it's not going to change that much, and that's really what we're talking about doing is ending up here versus here. And I think that both of those are good. But the important part is that you don't end up necessarily here on the rail, and you don't want to necessarily end up here short, or you don't want to go too far and end up here. It's like a range of zones, and if you can get up in this position, you're fine. And all you're doing now is just trying to be like, okay, well, all I'm trying to do is stun the ball to here, and that's simple if I can just, do that shot. Now, it requires you to practice this, but then once you realize it's like, okay, well, all I have to do is cut it in, and then I have to use a little bit of draw. I don't have to use left English or right English to make this ball. It doesn't matter what the angle is, because I'm not trying to change anything about what happens. I'm trying to get the cue ball to end up in the same place for all 3 shots with the same speed, not the same speed in this case, because the thinner it is, the more residual energy is going to be left in this distance, so you have to account for that. And then what you have to do is you got to use more draw, because you need less cue ball energy as far as velocity goes. So what you're going to be doing is making the cue ball, roughly speaking, just be like this much energy. See, a little bit more than you wanted, right? But this is still okay. So I say you want to aim for here, because you don't want to be on the rail necessarily. So if you come up short with your speed, you're going to be here, and then if you come up a little bit further, you can still make the ball. And this is that situation. And I'd say that lagging it a short distance is actually a lot harder than you think. So you got to kind of practice that as well if you want to like demonstrate what I'm talking about here to somebody else. So for this shot, it's doable. What I have to do here is hit it lower so that I can get less energy on the cue ball after contact. But it's not a different shot line. It's not a different cueing either. It's just hitting it softer, lower pace, and then hitting lower on the cue ball. Because what you want is the exact same. It's a certain amount of energy is going to make it go to that spot. Now, when you're over here, it's a thinner angle than here. The shot is actually the same. You just have to understand from here it's less speed and a little bit lower, and then here you can use more speed and hit it higher. That's the difference, because you're trying to get a certain energy condition, so to speak, when the cue ball is at this spot here. So wherever you're here or here, this is all dictates, okay, I need different energy to be applied, because even from this spot here, the same shot still exists. It's just now I gotta hit it very low, It's the same thing where it's like if you just practice the straight draw, your draw stroke to get it to where you understand your spin, because you're not trying to draw it, you're trying to get it to stun, you know. And obviously it's way more difficult to pocket from there, which is why I'm going to demonstrate it from here. So what I'm going to do is you just have to spend a little bit of time figuring out what the stun stroke is so that when you hit it, hitting it bad here, maybe I'll actually focus for the next one. My point is that you can come off and be predictable with this angle if you just start understanding, okay, if I go no spin and hit the stun shot, then I can get predictable. Then, you know, it's not, then you don't have to worry about like, okay, if I follow it, maybe it'll go into the pocket here, or it has all these different areas, and that's all, how hard am I going to hit it? It changes all that stuff, you know. But what I say is as you get better, you learn this tangent line to create shape. Now you just use the tangent line for position as far as, now if I can get the tangent line to work for me, then I can use it. Now if the tangent line doesn't work, say for instance, you start with that, it's like, okay, well if the tangent line gets me where I want to go, use the tangent line. Now some of the time it's not going to help me, like maybe you got to follow the ball. You know, like maybe there's a ball over here, you know, that's blocking, or maybe another ball that's blocking the area which I want to go. You know, maybe I wanted to go there that way, but now instead of that, I got to go forward. So, but you got to think is like, okay, well, if I'm using the tangent line here, that means that there's zero follow on the ball. So if I want to make the shot and go forward, now all I have to do is just think, okay, more follow spin on the cue ball, more top spin on the cue ball. So instead of going into the 5, for instance, something like that on this shot, roughly attitude, banging into those balls, now I can, I don't even remember what it was exactly. You just realize that by having more follow on the ball, instead of going like at the 5, now if I just put a little bit more follow here, now it's going down, and that's just slightly higher on the cue ball, so you just incrementally can apply more topspin, and that makes the cue ball go forward sequentially more. Like instead of tangent line, now you're going to get tangent line and then follow being applied with the cloth effects, and then more and more with more follow. And then what you end up with is if you use a little bit more speed, you're going to get initially the tangent line is going to be dominate always, and then the follow, or as you go to use draw, the same shot, maybe you do need to draw the ball, like for this 5 ball, for instance. Now your tangent line is at the 5, but if I can apply any draw to this, meaning below center action at the point of contact, the draw is going to add a vector of force on the cloth that's straight back towards the cue ball, straight back on the line of the shot, which is this way. So in effect, when the tangent line is going to be this way, but the force is that way, so it's going to make it turn towards that direction. If you apply enough, then it'll actually, you know, come back and then draw back this way. And the amount of drawback is going to be based on how much spin you put. So you could hit this with a certain amount and draw and scratch, or you could play less and then draw to here and bounce off, or you can draw more, potentially you can get up here even if your stroke is proper. For purposes of this, you just have to predict, okay, how much energy do I need to get it to come across here, because you don't want it to go too far and you don't want it to come short. So what you're doing now is you're like, okay, if I had practiced my stun shot and can end up on the side rail with my speed, like this shot here, I would say, let's see if I can do this. So that was roughly the stun, and I ended up coming off and a little bit hard here. So now if I basically do the same shot, but I use no draw, I think something like this. So now if I shoot the same shot but with more draw than that, even with the same cue ball velocity, now instead of going down table, which is what I didn't want, I'm going to come straight across the table. The same speed of stroke basically aligns with like the cue ball went off the rail as much, and now instead of it going a little bit further, I use basically the same energy. That draw was changed from being velocity, a little bit of cue ball velocity, to now it's drawn and it's been applied as spin, and that effect is that instead of ending up here by hitting lower on the cue ball, it's hitting here now. And it's the same line of action. The cue ball is going the same direction, it's hitting the same spot on the object ball, but what's happened is you're changing the spin characteristics at the moment of contact, and you're using the residual energy that's left, your knowledge of how much distance you're going to create to play your position, and then adapt it to your needs by using follow or draw, and that's allowing you to control the action of the cue ball. And this would vary from a situation when you're going to just let the cue ball roll. Say here, you're doing the same thing, but now instead of trying to control with topspin, you're just like letting it roll. And that's a different kind of shot than what I'm talking about here. And those are the shots that most people that you learn right away is like, well, you learn how to roll the ball, and cut it in. The problem is that only leads you to be able to do whatever rolling ball allows you to do with your cue ball position. It doesn't teach you or allow you to play positions other than what rolling ball is giving you. And once you start to be able to apply draw, follow, and then left and right English subsequently, then in order to use that properly, you have to understand, well, what's it for? Well, if you're just going to let the cue ball roll when you hit it, that's one thing, but the next shot to learn is to how to play that stop shot or even draw at that point. Then you're opening a whole new universe of like understanding that you're not like forced to predict when it rolls here and then kind of like goes down over into this area or whatever and back off the rail. Now you're actually dictating based off the shot that you want to shoot what has to happen, and then now your goal, instead of just making it and roughly like, oh, what's the speed going to lead me down over here, to being like, okay, well, instead of having, just letting the balls go wherever, I'm actually going to choose a shot, and now what I'm going to do is try to understand what the physics of the shot is telling me to do, and then my goal is then to just be able to approximate that shot with my stroke. So any shot that you pick, it's not important. It's more about just picking the shot. So you use the tangent line. Like say we're playing 10 ball and this is my out, right? And this is fine, doesn't really matter where that's at. What I'll do is figure out, okay, I'm coming to 3, I don't want shape on the 6. The tangent line from the 3, making that ball, that position the cue ball needs to be, is like this. So then if I was to go to this rail even, then now I'm back here. So when you shoot the shot, if you just play the stun and you play your speed, you could actually end up like right here by just using the stun and hitting that exactly the way you want to. Then the natural tangent line will take you over here. So I'm going to give it a try. So this is just below center with no English. I hit a little bit too low, and instead of here, it drew a little bit and ended up here. And this is a little bit risky because that's one of the difficult things is if you're not precise exactly, then you can get the unintended result. And that's why you don't necessarily choose like narrow pathways where you only have a few inches of variance here to be successful. On that shot, what I'd probably prefer to do is try to draw to the exact same position so that I don't end up maybe scratching. And on this shot, the difference here then is like, okay, well, what I gotta do is do a little bit of math. So I know that because it's close to the rail, it's not necessarily gonna be able to draw a lot. So really I'm thinking, okay, if I can manipulate the angle with draw from this spot on the rail, right here, maybe I can get it to just turn just a little bit, but that means that the angle that it's coming off of has changed. And now instead of coming off at this angle, I'm actually coming off at maybe this angle here, just from this position. And all I really want to do is end up like in this zone here. So this actually becomes a more viable shot to just hit low. And then you can put just a touch of left English, which won't affect your like pocketing so much because you're just using a minute amount. The more you use, the harder it is. And so you're developing a position that then becomes like, I'll just use this so I don't have to move the balls. This is your spot here. But I want it, the first shot was this shot, right? That was roughly the first shot. The second shot is actually like, I have to apply the spin, but I'll just hit it a little bit more up table. The draw, instead of here, is going to make it kind of come off at this angle. And then I'm going to use a little bit of left English to spin it to the middle of the table. Like that. And all you're doing is just realizing that that's what you're trying to do by hitting the cue ball, is create this energy that I just hit the ball with, roughly speaking, and that's what you have left after you make the ball go where you want. And that's basically how you do it, is you think, okay, well, if I position the cue ball at the spot that I need it to hit, where's it going to go after that? And then now you're like, okay, well, what do I need to change of the natural of that, which is the tangent line? I'm just talking about, like, if you're just doing lines and you're neglecting like spin and all that, stuff, and you're just looking at the geometry of the shot. That geometry is the stun geometry and that's why it's easier to visualize, because you're not changing anything with the physics, meaning the friction of the cloth, the roundness of the balls and all that. You're just talking about the geometry of it. The gearing action, all that stuff is not part of the geometry. That's part of the physics, which is the extra layer beyond that of knowledge that you're like, okay, well, how do we apply the geometry? Well, that's where you need physics. And the physics, the easiest way to describe physics is really to just use reality, because reality is actually what physics is trying to describe. So you're like, okay, well, this is a good game to just explain physics because it's all here, So by hitting a little bit left and draw, now I can get pretty much where I want, is this spot here. So I just visualize what's the cue ball need to look like, and then like the distance that's between here and here is all I have to predict. It's like, okay, well, how much energy is going to get removed? And then now I just have to apply that extra energy from this place instead of being at where I need it to go. Yeah, so one thing that's typical, if you put a little bit of left English on and you're hitting it soft, is that the cue ball will swerve more to the left. Like on this situation, I'm using left, it wants to swerve left. So the common thing that happens is that you'll hit it, and then the cue ball will start to swerve, and then you'll hit it thinly, which is why you want to avoid using English as much as you can, especially when you're using different paces. To counteract that effect, you could potentially just hit the ball a little bit fuller into the point instead of center of the hole. Like I said, this is all part of the physics of like counteracting what you're doing to make it to where you can get where you want to go. But it's just low left here, right? And that's just a system that you use based off the tangent line. Like here, from the 6 to the 7, the tangent line is actually fine. All I want to do is get back roughly to here, and if you come over and look at this tangent line, you'll see that it goes roughly to that spot. This is fine. So now, I don't want to do any English here. I just want center ball, and I just play the speed of the stroke. And if I apply any English, you're just going to add complexity to that. You have to learn the shot, but once you learned it, you'll realize that it's simpler than probably what you were doing before, or what you thought you needed to do. And it is what it is. Like, we're all trying to open our eyes up to better opportunities, and a lot has to do with finding simpler ways to do things, not more complicated ways. You have complex systems, and they work, but most of those are designed for specific situations. And what I think is for me is a little bit makes more sense is to try to create a simple framework that you can then deviate from as necessary to accomplish your unique goals, right? So by just using the tangent line and understanding of that, and then, okay, well, how much deviation do I need from that tangent line to create my position? So on this 7 to the 10, the tangent line is actually maybe to here. So I need, really what I want to do is get straight in inch so that this is my zone. And if you think you're okay, well, the line that I want to be at, if you draw kind of relatively where your tangent line is going to end up, it's going to mostly hit here. So what I need to do instead of using this is this, and that's either going to be a little bit of draw or you can use a little bit of right. In this case, I'll use a little bit of both. You could just get away with just low, actually, and really the smart shot, I would say, if you're just playing with no English and you learn how to strike the balls with that, that's really the best way to do it. You don't want to use spin if you can avoid it. I just find that for this type of shot, because of the angle, for whatever reason, the way that the physics works, it actually makes it easier to make the ball and you get your position a little bit easier. So you kind of use a little bit of a more normal, like, I don't know, it's a different stroke, but I think that most people are more used to it because this is kind of the way you learn how to shoot this shot is by using low right just to make the ball. But in this situation, it actually helps you get position as well, so it's worth it to do it. But I also think it's worth it to learn how to do it without English. So for this situation, I'm going to use no English. So that means I got to put a lot more draw than I would if I was using low right, because the right English is actually being used in lieu or instead or in replacement of extra draw. You know, if you learn extra draw, then you don't need to use as much spin, but that requires you to understand how to hit lower on the cue ball with more and less power and understand what that's doing. But that's part of the opening your eyes to what your capabilities are by just being like, okay, well, how low and how center can I still be as I continue to get further away from the center of the cue ball? And that partly is learning how to get lower is important, because then once you get lower, now you can go off to the side, and it's actually going to be more meaningful understanding because you've started from like one less variable just using the vertical axis of the cue ball. But it takes some understanding like, okay, well, we got to actually put in the reps to be able to hit that same spot, even though we're aiming lower on the cue ball, which is just a little bit different. You know, there's different effects. When you're putting that much bottom spin on it, there's actually going to be like a kicking up of this ball. And that means what it's basically, the way I explain it, is it feels like it's bouncing off the ball way more. When you have follow on it, the cue ball is like pushing through the ball, and it causes them to kind of stick and thud together. It's the opposite effect. They actually, when you use draw, they're touching for less time than they are when you're using follow. So you're getting more of a bouncy reaction off the cue ball, and thus the object ball itself is a little bit different hit. And in this situation, what you end up with is a slightly thinner hit when you use draw versus using follow, because the stickiness of the follow is what makes it hit fuller, and the bounciness of the draw makes it hit slightly thinner. So when you shoot the shot with follow, you're typically going to be overcutting it slightly, and with draw, you're going to be undercutting it slightly, because of the effect is the opposite to make it. And that's why if you hit it with just center ball, that's in between, and then you actually get the true hit. That's why it's important to learn the tangent line, is because as you go up and down, you're slightly deviating where you need to hit to create the effect that you want because of the physics of the shot. So for this situation, when you're drawing the ball, you have to hit it a little bit fuller, which helps you. So you're actually still okay here. So what am I trying to do? Right here, let's get back to that. Yeah, this is just going to be draw. If I hit this chalk, then it's going to be really good. So that's what I'm going for. Just low. And that's no right or left English. Now you can choose to hit it with right or left English if you want to, and that's perfectly acceptable. You get to choose to do it however you want. I'm explaining the tangent line here, and like by using the tangent line as my initial understanding of where the cue ball is likely to go, and then using that as my stepping stone and my foundation, for, okay, now what physics do we need to actually put in there to make it do what we want, and not just what it's going to do if we do nothing. You know, like it's valid for, you know, a lot of situations. You know, it's like when you're playing, you know, say you're in this situation here where I'll use this. How many times have you gotten in this situation where you're almost straight on this ball and you need to get to this ball and you want to like do something, you can't easily get to this spot. Maybe you want to get to here. You can't easily get there anyway. Your tangent line leads you over here, right? But if you think about, okay, well, what's follow going to do is follow is going to add this top spin. But the problem is that if you use too much follow and you don't get the stun element of it, then your cue ball is going to go forward. What you really want it to do is go sideways on this tangent line, but with a little bit of follow, so that instead of it hitting and coming this way, it's coming into this rail and then coming this way. And by learning how to do the stun shot, now you can learn how to apply that follow without making a rolling ball shot. Because what you need is to get tangential velocity. So then that is like, you think, oh, okay, you got to learn how to apply this follow spin and be able to use the amount of power that you want and not have it be a rolling ball, because you need acceleration towards this rail, and it becomes kind of a punch shot, but you're actually hitting it slightly above center so that you can not have this reaction happen. If I just hit it with just stun like this here, it would come across, you know, this way. But if I hit it slightly higher than that, but with some decent power, I can get it to go forward into the rail and then come back at a little bit more straight angle without using any spin, left or right. Because when you're close to the rail like this, you don't want to use that spin, because that, you know, the downward angle puts energy into the cloth that makes it masse and swerve way more. So on shots like this, you want to be able to just use high and low ball, and you just got to understand the way that it's going to be. So if I'm trying to get here, which I think is good, because then if I make the 4 this angle, I can play back over and over to here. If I get straight in, then I can draw straight back. But I don't necessarily need to do that, and because of the side pocket here, you don't necessarily want to be coming straight at the scratch. So you got to be a little bit more cautious about what you're doing.